And so a new day dawns, but the sun can barely be seen in the valley of the ashes. It is a fantastic farm where ashes grow like wheat into ridges and hills and grotesque gardens. Presiding over this desolation are the disembodied eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg. The landscape itself is the manifestation of the corruption of the distant city, with the eyes of Eckelberg sitting in judgment like a god that broods on over the solemn dumping ground. Not many people reside in this wasteland. How could anyone feel fulfilled in a place like this? Yet, here are some signs of life, if you can call it life. Look at this spiritless man standing beneath a filthy sign bearing his name. This is George Wilson, the proprietor of this shadow of a garage. You can still discern some signs of good looks beneath the sunken flesh, but nothing ever thrives here, only ever dies. Like Gatsby, he has dreams, only his are much more prosaic. Sell a car, make some cash, and get out of this living hell. An equal dissatisfaction can be detected in his wife, but she possesses a vitality that her husband does not. She carries her flesh sensuously, especially around newcomers, but the way she looks at her husband reveals a contempt that comes from the realization that she too is wasting away here, and it is George Wilson that is to blame. Yet, each time the train stops at the drawbridge, her senses come alive, as if she's waiting for a Prince Charming to whisk her away from this forgotten wasteland. A man gets off the train, signals to the woman, and she slinks away from her husband and boards the train just as he reboards it, but discreetly in another car. Clearly, they have played this game before. The drawbridge comes down and the train sets off to the glamorous lights of Manhattan as her husband looks on forlornly, but completely unaware of the affair that is happening right under his very nose. Every mile she puts between herself and the Valley of Ashes seems to relieve the pressure of her situation until she reaches Penn Station, and she is positively beaming as she falls into the arms of her lover, who staggers a little as if drunk. Now the great hinge of ash has lifted, we can clearly see the man. He's none other than Tom Buchanan. So, Mrs. Wilson is his latest plaything. Let us observe something of their life together. The change in Mrs. Wilson is remarkable. She has begun to act haughtily, and now we see why. Her urban lifestyle is the very antithesis of her squalid existence among the ashes. Here, she is the proud occupant of a downtown apartment. This pride is obvious as she summons the neighbor and her sister to the apartment, so she can gloat over the temporary status provided by Buchanan's money and affect the most absurdly superior attitude to all of those around her. Yet, given his massive wealth, this place is cramped and tastelessly furnished, an indication perhaps of how little Buchanan values her. Observing them together, we see how Buchanan indulges her airs and graces, until she oversteps the mark, that is, and mentions Daisy, at which point he puts her back in her place with a short, deft movement of the hand that breaks her nose. This mixture of pride and violence highlights the corrupt underbelly of the American dream. On the one hand, we see the pompous ugliness of Mrs. Wilson's social climbing and her petty snobbery, and on the other, the cruel and immoral nature of Tom Buchanan. Although from different sides of the tracks, these characters embody the same skewed values of unbridled capitalism, the sickening consumption for its own sake. They are also united in their betrayal and hypocrisy. Buchanan defends Daisy's honor while openly conducting an affair. Mrs. Wilson shamelessly deceives a man who is desperate to improve their situation with the very man who is pretending to be their salvation. The homes of Gatsby and Mrs. Wilson are very different on the outside, yet ironically they do share some things in common. Gatsby and Myrtle are both social climbers, with an over-elaborate taste that certainly crosses the border into vulgarity. There is also a sense of temporariness and disposability to their residences, perhaps because you feel that neither of them actually belong there. This idea may also be extended to their actual lives. Despite these subtle similarities, there is a huge moral gap between Gatsby and Mrs. Wilson. Myrtle is pathetic in her snobbery and naive in thinking that she is anything more than a sex object to Tom. Gatsby, on the other hand, retains an essential dignity and an inner beauty despite his outward dishonesty. His hope is transcendental, while everything else we see mapped out here, even Daisy Buchanan, is merely the foul dust that floats in the wake of his dreams.